Cosmick Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business with your hosts, Chris Nanolini and Nick Michaels. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmick Voice. This is Season 3, Episode 6. I am here with my co-host, Chris Nanolini.
Greetings, hello.
And I am Mick Michaels. Welcome back, everyone, to another show. Chris, how are you, my friend?
Doing awesome, bro. How about you, Mick?
I am doing fantastic, as always. Glad to be back on the show. Glad to have you on my screen once more.
Absolutely. Highlight of the week.
That's
Highlight
right.
of the week.
We're only a screen away in this world. We're only one screen away. It's not even 6 degrees of separation unless you got 6 people. It's, even StreamYard just gives you only 4 people. So I guess you're only 4 screens away.
I love it.
Anything
That's
exciting
awesome.
going on in your existence, in your screen world? Anything
my
going
screen
on?
world? No, man, no. My by the time people hear this, it'll probably just it'll just be happening. So on a personal level, my mom is moving from her house. So finally, I am taking all of my stuff that's been there forever and getting it out of her house. So like my stuff just keeps getting more and more and more. But it's cool. It's cool. I get to like open up these Tupperware containers. I'm like, oh, I forgot I had this, or whatever it is, or my comics and my toys and just all kinds of stuff. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I found like a Walt Disney World Pirates of the Caribbean, or Caribbean, however you want to say it, like an old mug from like 2010 that I had and it just packed away. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm finding all this great stuff now.
Well, there goes your free storage all these years.
Dude.
But better yet, listen, what my mom did, all my stuff went. And and when I went back years later and go, hey, where's it? Oh, I got rid of that long. What? Let me tell you, that wasn't a pleasant scene for me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, because I would probably, and the funny thing is like, I look at this stuff and like you had said, your mom had got rid of it all. And if you didn't really think about it, you probably would never, you would just be like, I wonder where that went. Like you would never think, like half the stuff I see that I'm opening containers, half the stuff I forgot I even had. So even if my mom did throw it all away, I totally would have never remembered I had it. But
yeah, well, that's
now that I have it, I'm like, I remember that.
When I moved out a long time ago, I took the stuff that was most important that came with me, because I had this delusion that I was going to have a, like you see these guys on Facebook, they got like rooms and basement. Well, that in a real life situation, that stuff doesn't always happen. You know what I mean? Right. Unless you got like a 12-bedroom house and your job, pays you, whatever the case may be. But for the rest of us, and besides that, I think most of my storage is filled with overbought CDs from my bands over the years.
Oh yeah, I got a couple.
I got more CDs. I got furniture built from jewel cases.
A lot of drink coasters in there.
That's right,
you, brother. What's going on with you? Anything interesting?
Same old. Keeping busy, doing what I can. You know what I mean? Keeping the devil at bay, before he comes get me someday. But that's,
there you go.
Fantastic. That's what you got to do up in space. You can only run so fast because, we're only floating around. But anyway, here we are, Season 3, Episode 6.
Yes.
Tonight, we are talking about, do aging artists really have something to say? Do aging artists really have something to say? Now, prepare yourself. I don't know what's going to happen. So, sir, you may, depending on what you say, you may get emails following the release of this episode.
I would love to. Are you kidding?
Yeah, really. At least we know people are listening. So if you have some complaint, please send them to halfassbooking@gmail.com. That's a little tidbit from a previous episode maybe you're following. I don't know. So what do you think, buddy? Do aging artists really have something to say, or are they just full of hot air?
Man, I think that everybody has something to say. Anybody that has been through it, for a lot of, for the aging rock stars, up to guys on our level who've been doing it for so long. I think all of us have something. I think all of us have stories to share and lessons to learn. If we didn't have lessons to learn, or, if we didn't want to share our lessons, we wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Right.
Do I think some of them kind of are full of fluff? Yeah, I do. There are, because it's like, I listen to some of these guys and I think, if you took more care of your performance or your, especially the singers, like your voice from back in the day, like maybe I'd pay more attention. But if you're going out there and you're not giving your all, why am I going to listen to you? You know what I mean? Like, so I think they all have something to share. I do. I think they all can teach us something, whether it's one thing. I'm a firm believer in, if you take a little thing out of something somebody says, you may not agree with all of it, but maybe there's that one little piece of information that makes you go, huh? And then you turn it into what you think, then maybe they know what they're talking about. I mean, obviously they know somewhat what they're talking about because they've been through it. They've been through a lot of the aging rock stars that you and I refer to on a daily basis during the show. A lot of them have been to the top of the mountain and have been back down and are kind of, some are coming back up, some have given up, or, you know, some are back on top. So I think everybody has something to share and something today that makes perfect sense. At least I think so.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, some of it does come from a certain point of view, there, Obi-Wan. But at the same time, I guess if you look at it, it depends on where they were at. And a lot of these guys that you hear talk quite often, especially now, there's a lot of podcasts or YouTube channels popping up where they're interviewing, you know, guys from the 80s, right? 80s, early 90s type of thing. Right. A lot of these guys aren't really doing much anymore in way of like making headway. They're probably still performing to some degree. And again, there's different levels of that. But I think that what you start to see, like you said, look, I agree with you. Everybody has something to say, for sure. I think I sometimes learn more from the guys that are in the trenches, the indie artists, because some of these indie artists have been at it longer than some of these big names have been around. And they've been through the business on a different level, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
But they've been able to keep their careers going to some degree in all the different temperatures that the music industry has had over the past 40 years. And it's been up and down and around and round. And, you know, we've, since 93, the industry has changed multiple times. Like almost every 10 years, a new industry kind of emerges, so to speak, right? And actually, it's been less than that. Like, I mean, like every couple years, 2-3 years, there's a whole new, you know, kind of regime, so to speak. And with COVID, it's changed yet again. I mean, and some people are saying for the worse, some people are saying for the better. We'll just have to wait and see. You know, sometimes these things take a little bit. And I think that may be another reason why you're starting to see the surge of, we'll go with the title of the show, aging artists starting to speak up, speak out, right? It's an opportunity. Again, it's another 15 minutes of fame, nothing wrong with it, right? That's good business. Take advantage of it. Yeah. I think that some of the things, if you're listening and reading between the lines, you can tell the guys that were either just kind of fell into a hole, so to speak, and dealt a bad hand at that time, and that's why they didn't go any further. Or, you know, some of the guys that were able to kind of almost muddle through it and then find new life someplace else.
Yeah.
You know, like here, I'll give you an example, like Jack Blades from Night Ranger. You know, as Night Ranger was starting to decline in their popularity as the tail of the 80s were happening, they were somewhere in between, right? They were really a hard rock band that kind of then got grouped in with metal, right? The early metal, and then they just didn't. They tried. A lot of bands tried. They got the hair and the clothing, but the sound didn't work the same way, and they weren't doing the thing. You know, so what did he do? He went another way and teamed up with a super group and wrote some amazing stuff. You know, that lasted into the 90s, and then, you know, you find out that they were paid $1 million not to do their last album. Yeah. You know, which is a smart deal. And, you know, and then on and off with Night Ranger and doing stuff with Tommy Shaw, and then, you know, but they stayed in the game the best that they could, did other things, wrote a lot of songs. Now, again, I mean, he made a lot of good money on publishing and being a songwriter and stuff like that, which is smart business, right? And now Night Ranger's been back up on the rise the past few years, and with all that old stuff coming back around, you know, that every 30-year type thing, it's a positive aspect. So there's some stuff that you could learn from somebody like him, which goes to say, for me, and what I'm picking up from it, and I got to get back to what I originally started to say, because at this age you quickly divert your attention someplace else, and you never get back to it, and you just there's always an open-end statement somewhere. It just was that a squirrel? Anyway, you got you. So it goes to show you could tell some of the guys that had a little bit more business savvy, even back then, that were able to parlay or keep something going or got involved in something that kind of helped push them through the low times, right? And they're the guys you really want to get that nugget from. Like Dave from Y&T, he wound up getting really into recording and the digital process, by the 90s, early 2000s. And he was really working that. And that kept, him going. What's his name? Steve Plunkett from...
yes, Autograph.
Autograph, right? He went on to write...
Theme songs
and stuff. And when Autograph got back together a number of years ago, he was asked to, do you want to be part of it? He's like, nah. He goes, I just don't have the time, I mean, look what Devo did, right? They did the same thing. They got into, Stuart Copeland, right? They used whatever their celebrity was or whatever their talent was to create a new line. Steve Lynch from Autograph, he came back when they got together again, and then he wound up stepping down and writing music for labels and stuff, creating music and the publishing and all that kind of stuff, soundtracks and stuff. And it's long term, doesn't have to travel. I mean, so you're parlaying that. And to me, it's those guys you really want to listen to, and figure out what it was they did, or take some of these other guys. And again, I don't want to name names, but you could tell it was just a party for them, and they were either on the bandwagon following along, or do they have something to say? Absolutely. I think there's something to say for anybody. But then you got to take some stuff with a grain of salt. Like, is it worth listening to, or are they just giving like lip service because again they're just taking advantage of the 15 minutes of fame with the hope that something will arise from it? I don't know. I guess that's where it comes into the sermon. Now, to get back to where I was 25 minutes ago, I think that I learned a lot from a lot of the independent and indie artists, the in the trench artists, more than I do sometimes the bigger guy, because the chances of that ever happening are slim to none in those extremes, right? Like, I enjoy listening to like Nikki Sixx talk and Sammy Hagar and things like that, but really these are guys that have been around for so long. Like Sammy Hagar predates metal and all that, so these guys are kind of like grandfathered in, so to say, right? So, but there's a fascinating life to learn from that, and then you kind of like live vicariously through their stories and things. But having the opportunity through the Cosmic View to interview a lot of different people, here in the States and other countries, you really learn a lot about how the scenes tick in different places. There's a lot of similarities, but then there's not, right? There's a lot of places, like in Iran, the government's involved, and they restrict certain kinds of music, and you could go to jail. Like, there's imprisonment and fines for certain kinds, and I can't even fathom that. And some of these are younger artists too, so just because of age, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't wisdom involved. And again, like I said, you can discern between people who are just kind of like giving you some lip service, kind of like what we do here on this podcast, so lots and lots of lip service, because we got 45 minutes we got to fill, right?
This is Stephen Pearcy from Rat, the Rat Bastard. You're listening to the Cosmick Voice.
I think also, too, you were talking about what artists have done. Look at, and Linda Perry from Four Non Blondes. She's a perfect example of that. She had this band. They had one great hit, through the 90s. And then when she realized that wasn't working out, she kind of became like this songwriter and ended up getting, she got an award for, being one of the best songwriters of 2015. I mean, she wrote for Pink, she wrote for Gwen Stefani, Adele, like she wrote all these songs. And, she's another person that kind of learned how to survive out of the failure of that Four Non Blondes project, and as good as and talented as they were, like you were saying about, just finding other things and doing other things. Now I have a question for you, Mick. So, because the basis of our conversation is aging artists, and because you're a journalist, you do get to talk to a lot of these younger artists. Do you think that younger people would take advice from an aging artist? Example, do you think somebody that is young and up and coming would listen to the stories and warnings from, let's say, Jack Russell or Jack Blades or, I mean, because, younger people would be like, who the hell are these people and why am I listening to them?
Well, yeah, there's some of that. What I've seen is a lot of the younger artists that are up and coming, they refer to a lot of, like, now just let's speak strictly like hard rock metal type of.
Yeah.
A lot of them will talk about Motorhead, AC/DC, Kiss, those type of bands.
Your big ones.
Your big ones.
Names.
And
yeah,
that's like they're gravitating because, again, it's like following the fire trucks to the event, right? And that's what they see. Where there's some of these other artists that, no, not really. I think it really is an individual thing. But from what I see is that's where, like people are still following the Metallicas and what they're doing. But again, like it's easy to discuss certain things when you're always at a certain level, right? And again, all like we talked about in an episode about Kiss. Though Kiss had a low point, their low point was way better than any low point I've ever had. I remember, here, and an example, I remember seeing a MC Hammer biography, right? And they're talking about how bad, this and that and stuff was and so on and so forth. He's going on with it, but he actually said at one point, I'm just going to paraphrase, he goes, listen, I'm not saying that, I had to go back working in a factory and all and, and stuff like that. Things were just for what his lifestyle was and what he was doing, the type of money that was going out. He just wasn't able to do that anymore. But he didn't have to go get a paper route and wait tables at 2 a.m. at the local diner. None of that happened. Just like with Kiss, they never went back down to being an opening act. You know what I mean? They didn't didn't play the Spectrum Theater here in Philadelphia back in the 80s. They didn't go play it at local Joe Blow's bar. I mean, you know what I mean? They never had to do that. So it's relative, right? And then what happens is, I think that with some of these aging stars, like, say, Kiss and some of the other bigger ones, some of them forget. And I can understand that. They've been at the top so long. They've been in a different plateau than the average person, and how their regular life is that they lose a little bit of that connection. They want to have it. They still talk about, I remember this and I remember that, and we had to do this and we had to do that. But it's different for a guy who did it for 20 years or still doing it. There's a lot of guys I get to talk to that I know who they are. A group of people know who they are, but they're still kind of like, they're still walking the trenches. I mean, the Ramones were notorious for that. I mean, especially here in the States, it was still like they were trying to make a statement, make their bones. Though they had a following, there was a cult status. I mean, they were a great, energetic band. But at the same time, they never received the level of anything that in their genre that, say, Metallica did in their genre. Right? And so there may be a little different, that doesn't necessarily mean that their attitude isn't one way or the other. They could still have a ton of ego because of who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when I get turned off, when that ego comes into play into these conversations, and there's that dividing line. So now there's no more connection. Right? I mean, and I think as artists, and speaking strictly as artists, but I also think as just regular people, we look for those connections and things. I think that's why, like we talked about this once before, that's why that underdog story is such a selling point in PR, whether it's in a movie, in a book, in an artist's story. They overcome, the impossible to get where they are because people root for the underdog because they feel some connection, because everybody's looking for that one element that you could go and run with and maybe change your own existence. This is one of the reasons I enjoy reading autobiographies more so than unauthorized stuff. Though you can learn some stuff from there if these people were involved with the artist or the band. But there's something about the autobiography that kind of frees up, and you can kind of get a little better feeling of who that person is. That type of thing.
I think with underdog stories too, it's one of those things where, like you said about a connection, where your connection is, if they can do it, so can I. Like, he went through the same thing and he's dealing with the same feelings I'm dealing with. So if he can overcome them, or she, then so can I. And I think like that kind of relates to what you were saying about having that connection. Yeah.
Listen, in the 80s, right, when I was schlocking around the garbage that I was schlocking around, I remember I was a painter, right? And
right.
And into the 90s, and I remember, like, you know, being on the ladder, and you got the music on, and Bon Jovi comes on, Runaway or something. You're going, you know, Bon Jovi was a house painter, so maybe, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm on the right track here. Nope. But there's a connection, right? But there's another guy, right?
Yes.
Like, there's another guy who really parlayed things, and he just kept going, just would not stop. One of his quotes, you know, I'll sleep when I'm dead, that kind of thing. You know, he's like, he just works and works and works. I mean, here's, like we talked about it before, he had 3 huge, humongous selling albums, and then the 90s hit and things fell apart. And even though he had a good album with Keep the Faith, and I remember going to see him when he came to Philly in the late 90s, it was a phenomenal show, you know, but then he releases that song that he does a country version of it, and he kind of does a crossover, and he gets involved in movies, and then he's, you know, buying sports teams, and he's doing this, and he's doing... So he kept things going. He just found another way of doing it.
Yes.
You know, writing for other artists, producing other bands. I mean, yes, okay, he had major success, right? And then, you know, that major success back then had a huge payday, a financial reward to it. So that if you were smart, you know... Which he was, you know, he did something with it. So it gave him, like Joe, we talked about with David Lee Roth, it gave him that opportunity to go to Japan and live there, or take off to the Amazon, or do something crazy, because he didn't have to do a 9 to 5 anymore. He wasn't tied to anything.
Right.
So, you know, again, if you've ever listened to some of David Lee Roth's interviews, even the ones within the past few years, I'm not sure you can even follow what he's saying, let alone connect with anything he's saying. Right? You know what I'm saying? So is he full of hot air, or is it ego talking? Is it, you know, I mean, it's hard for I think people, it's like watching a train wreck. Like, you just want to see it, where this is going. How's he going to get from A to B to C? And if you've ever watched it, I'm still not sure how he got to A to B to C, but you know, in his mind he did.
You know, I think it's funny too, because him and Steven Tyler, they kind of, well, David Lee Roth has more David Lee Roth isms. And with David Lee, like, sometimes you have to read between the lines. But I think David Lee has been David Lee for so long, he doesn't know how not to be David Lee.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure there's a bit of, I don't want to say a normal human being, because that's not a person you could have a conversation with, a one-on-one, where he's not on, quote unquote. You know what I mean? But Steven Tyler's the same way. If you've ever seen him in an interview, in a relaxed interview, he carries sheets of paper, because his mind is just constantly going. Yeah. So, you know, with a guy like that, you lose a connection with, and of course, you know, obviously Aerosmith's been through the
ups and downs, major
downs of downs. Yeah, man. And even with a guy like Tyler, like, he figured it out, he put out a solo record, whatever. But you know, do you lose a connection with that? Does the stage persona, when it comes into your everyday life, like, do you lose that connection? And do you lose what you're trying to put across? David Lee, perfect example. Like, David Lee's done a ton of stuff. We said in the previous podcast, he was an EMT. He spent 2 years in Japan. He was a sheep herder. Like, he did all this stuff, and he probably has some amazing information, but sometimes I feel like he's too busy being David Lee Roth to really kind of let it out. Like, every once in a while you'll hear him say it, but there's a lot of stuff there that he just doesn't get out because he's too busy just being David Lee. Yeah,
there's that character that's happening that sometimes I think misses the opportunity for that connection. But then again, he may not even care about that because he is David Lee Roth, and he knows that. Like, to him, that's the most important thing. With Steven Tyler, I've had his autobiography for years. I still haven't finished it. I picked it up and put it down multiple times because I am just worn out. I have to reread stuff. I'm like, what? And the way that it's the same way writing is that he talks, and it's like, oh man, I'm worn out from this. You know, a chapter, I'm like, whew, man, I just ran a marathon. I swear to myself, I'm going to finish it before I die. So if it may take me 20 years, but I'm there. You know what I mean? It's crazy. It's crazy.
You know, there's another guy too that sometimes, and I'm a huge fan of Rob Zombie. Sometimes when he talks or when he has something to say, I lose connection with him too, because he is so self-deprecating. Like, he just makes fun of himself so much that, you know, he doesn't take himself seriously, which rock on, I get. But in that, you lose a lot of what he's trying to say because he's too busy trying to downplay how badass he is, if that makes sense. Like,
sure.
Listen, the dude's badass. There's no two ways about it. I mean, you know, he's awesome. When I see him on interviews, he doesn't want to be awesome, or maybe he knows he's awesome and doesn't want to come across as he's awesome. So you lose that too because he's trying to play off who he really is, where he is the perfect opportunity to be able to tell these great stories. I mean, he's been in it all. He's done movies, he's done comic books. Like, he's done all these things that, and again, I'm sure he has a lot of things that he could share and say, but he's too busy kind of just making fun of himself and downplaying his talent than actually giving information out there.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a psychological thing that a lot of us will deal with, not me, but it will deal with, that success creates two versions. Either you embrace it and you become larger than the success itself, so to speak, right? And you have these gigantic egos that the world really revolves around you, or there's a guilt that comes with it because you just want to be one of the guys. You got the opportunity and you don't want people thinking of you as the other person.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, George Clooney always says, listen, I get it out of the way. I take a cheap shot at myself so nobody else does. It clears the air and we can go on to being, you know, a regular conversation. He doesn't have a problem with it. And there's a comfort level in that because he knows what he's done, where he's been, and what he's accomplished. Because at one point in the 90s, early 2000s, he was like the go-to guy.
He was the go-to guy.
He was the go-to guy for movies, for TV, for producing. You needed a deal, you go talk to George Clooney. And, you know, apparently he still has some of that stigma going on, but he's just a little, you know, he's a little older now, married a hot young wife. I got plenty of money. What's he got to do? What's he got?
Right.
You know
he got nothing to prove.
He got nothing to prove at this point. So he does what he has to do. You know what I mean? When he wants to do it. Some other guys, well, you know, we got to keep clawing at it. And I know what you're talking about. There's some artists that talk, and you're like, sorry, man, I can't seem to. You know, they want to be cool, they want to whatever, and it just doesn't come across.
It doesn't.
As such, you know.
You are listening to the Cosmick Voice with your hosts, Chris Natalini and Mick Michaels.
When you listen to Ozzy, I mean, and it's been like this for a long time, there's a comfort that you get from listening to Ozzy. Because you know Ozzy's, like, I mean, here's a guy who was at the top, then at the bottom, then back at the top, and then like a mega top, right? Everybody looks at Ozzy as like, you know what I'm saying? He's that status. But here's a guy with a lot of problems, and he blames himself, and he carries guilt, and he does this, and he does that, and, you know, you don't understand him half the time, and you watch that show with him and Sharon and Jack, and they're in their theater room, and they're talking about ghosts and stuff, and they're just... Sharon's a little bit more animated in the fact that you could tell she's you know, in control of everything she says and stuff like that, and maybe Ozzy's a shtick too, but at the same time, I don't think so. I think that's the way he is. And
I believe that.
There's something kind of cool about that. So, you know, on Ozzy's Boneyard, with his friend, they do a show and they talk about old things and stuff like that. And if you can decipher sometimes what Ozzy's saying, I mean, I think there's some legitimate information that you can get to. Another case in point, I'll bring it out. I was listening to Stern, you know, he's on vacation for the summer, played a lot of artist interviews from the time, and he did one with Robert Plant at one time. And I actually got to listen to the interview twice because it was so interesting. You could tell there was a humbleness, but at the same time, hey, I'm Robert Plant from Led Zeppelin kind of attitude.
He knew who he was.
He knew who he was, and he knew what he accomplished, and he didn't want to go through the ropes of, you know, of BS questions.
Right.
You know what I mean? But he didn't mind talking about some things, and he was like, you know, we were just guys that we didn't think this way. We were just writing music, and we were doing this. And so there was some interesting things about that. You know, and he's been a guy that's been a supporter of like, hey, guys, you got to get out there and listen to new music, new artists, that kind of thing. So he knows his station. He knows what he did. He also knows that it was a long time ago. However, it can never be taken away. So he knows how to work the room because really, in essence of, say, you know, rock music in general, I mean, that's like rock royalty, right? It's kind of like, It's kind of like Paul McCartney, right? He's got a new 6-part special on Hulu.
Yeah.
And
Hulu, yeah.
you can tell, too, he's down to earth, but down to earth Paul McCartney is not like the regular guy who works at the local factory. This is Paul McCartney, a Beatle, who's been on top for the past 50-plus years, and you can see the confidence in him, and same with Robert Plant, the confidence in what they say, how they say it, and just by that reminding you, hey, by how they say whatever they say, I'm Paul McCartney of the Beatles.
Right.
You know what I mean? I know what I'm talking about. I got hits, I got this. But at the same time, he's also just trying to be a regular guy, an older, senior citizen, but who has one hell of a track record. He's got more stories than, and that's really... So there's some stuff that you could learn there. There was things he was saying like, I don't know how we did that. He goes, I hear the bass part and I'm saying, how did I come up with that? Even now, I'm saying, how did I come up with that? Is he playing it down, or is he being dead serious? I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm taking it, after I'm watching it, that maybe he was being serious because, saying that we were in that moment at the time. There was things happening. We were in such a magical time that things kind of just appeared, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And he looks back now saying, that's not things that I'm doing now. Yes, I'm a fantastic player, songwriter, still doing it, but I'm not doing what I did then. How did I do that then? And I have all this experience now. And that's the way I'm taking it. So it's kind of interesting to see his reaction, especially listening to, and I don't know if you've seen it, and I don't want to give too much away for those that didn't, Rick Rubin grabs some tracks,
I know, I
and
love that.
And they're dropping, the faders, and they're going, listen to this part, changing the mix a little bit and all that kind of stuff. And for those that aren't really involved in the music as a dissection, as the mechanics of the music, you're hearing stuff that you may have not picked up, and you're going, oh yeah, this, and we decide this, and even some songs are going, you're doing this, by all rights it shouldn't go with this, but you guys put, and he even finds it to be amazing. So I think there's some things you can learn from there, but then you got to kind of apply it to your station.
Yeah, of course.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, and people have to sometimes discern that, because it's like, you're not Paul McCartney from the Beatles. That's, you have to be whoever. Though I did interview somebody recently who said that they were the next Ed Sheeran. And I was like, wow. Okay.
All right. Okay. Hey, listen. Okay.
I guess you got to have goals. You got to put it out there and say, this is what I am.
If you put it out in the universe, man, you never know.
Right. I am the next Frodo Baggins with a guitar. I am positive of it. And my feet aren't as hairy.
I don't know, man. I do enjoy listening to what the aging guys, or the older guys, or I should say guys of our generation, guys and women of our generation. I do enjoy listening to their stories, and it is interesting. And, I'm always willing to hear something and still incorporate it into my career today if I find that, it could work, or, if I could maybe make it work for me. I think they do have a lot to say. But I really do also agree with the younger guys, like you were saying, because you do talk to a lot of younger talents, because they're kind of doing it a newer way. They have a newer way of doing things, newer way of looking at things that maybe you and I did, or at least you and I do now. They have a new way of looking at it because they're doing things a little different now. They have social media, and, they're more, a lot of the younger guys are in tune with computers and more technology, and more in tune of what's going on in their age group.
Right. Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. In our age group, nothing's happening. There's some trips to
sleep.
There's some sleep. There's some trips to the refrigerator in between commercials, and a lot of trips at night to the bathroom. So so that's about our demographic. If they can actually get up in the morning, it's a positive day. So, but you're absolutely right. The younger bands definitely have their finger on the pulse for their demographic. No two ways about it. And that's part of the appeal, right? Like you said, they definitely have control or a good grasp on the social media, because it's constantly changing. The social media is constantly changing. One week it's one thing, another week it's another thing. How it's being presented, but they're up on it. Honestly, I still struggle at times. And there's, like we talked about this before in other episodes, there are so many social media platforms, some big, some not so big, some worth checking into, some with smaller groups. Because again, you can have the same bang on a smaller group social media platform than getting lost in something like Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Because it just, like, if you were on Facebook, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, 15 years ago, you were making a big splash in the early days, right?
Yep.
If you're jumping on now, it's like, because people are buying likes, they're buying this, they're buying that, just to get some fill. But the thing is if you go from 0 to 150, like, listen, there are bands that come through my desk, and you check them out, you get your information on them, you're doing the research because you want to have some valid questions, you know, and you're like, my God, all these likes on this Facebook page, and I've never heard of them. Now, listen, again, we talked about this. This could be my age. It could be my interests. It could be whatever.
Right.
But, listen, there's bands that I'm aware of that I haven't quite heard because they constantly pop up. They're making some kind of headway. But then there's bands with astronomical numbers, and you're like,
who the hell are they?
Their numbers on Spotify are just, they're bigger than some well-known acts. And I'm like, I don't understand. So I'm not going to say one way or the other. We're not pointing fingers. We're not making an accusation. I'm just saying, it's like you said, if you have your finger on that pulse of that particular scene, because the scene is so cut up now. It's not just one scene. There's multiple scenes in scenes, right? Back in our day, it was one scene. And everybody shared the scene. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why there was a little bit more camaraderie in that scene. Now there's so much scene. It's always been every man for themselves, but now it's so much every man for himself that nobody will even say hello.
Yeah.
Like, right? You know what I mean?
I agree.
I think you're absolutely right. I've always been drawn to those artists that you hear other people talk about, that they were fantastic guys, that they always had something, even if they had problems in their life, they were still fantastic guys. Like Alice Cooper was always classified as a real good guy. Now, he had anger issues during his early days with the drinking and the drugs. A lot of people, he even admitted he was a big a-hole, but once he got his act together, he made it his mission to get other people. I enjoyed listening, hear him talk. And again, he's on a level that I'll never be. But there's some realism to what he's saying. In my opinion. Sammy Hagar years ago couldn't stand listening to him. It's like, man, the motor mouth. Can you shut up? But now I enjoy. it. Maybe because I'm older and I get it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, you talk about a guy who's got stories. You know, he's fantastic. And I've always heard he was a nice guy. Like everything I read and people I've talked to.
He always seems like he's a nice guy. Anytime I've ever heard, there have been a couple of interviews I've seen him and go, man, he kind of has an ego. But of course he has an ego because he's Sammy Hagar. But he is, to me, he is always the constant nice guy, at least in the things I've seen him in.
Yeah, well, listen, like you said, I mean, Montrose to the Red Rocker days. I mean, this guy, and then into Van Halen, and then, and so on and so on, Cabo Waba Waba, and and this and that and the guy's got the life, man. You know what I'm saying? Do you take what he says with a grain of salt? Can you learn from that? You can learn sometimes by listening to people. You can learn what not to do, right? Like athletes do that. If they've been sidelined and they're watching other teams or team members, they can learn what not to do to be a better athlete.
Yeah.
Because they're seeing it from a spectator point of view now instead of someone who's participating. It's like, okay, listen, that's not good technique. Maybe it's working, but it's really not efficient. It's not effective. It's not mechanically sound. Same thing here, right? We could, because we're picking up, like we talked about early, picking up these little nuggets that like you said, then how do we apply them to what we want to do? And really, so do aging artists have something to say? Yeah, absolutely. Everybody's got something to say. And if you really want something to say, or you have something to say, get a podcast, okay? just do it. Get it over with. That's what we need, more podcasts, just like we need more releases. You know what I mean? I say, listen, give everybody a shot. Listen to what they have to say. If it's definitely an artist that you're drawn to, if they're artists that you want to be like or you admire, listen to what they have to say. But then take that information and make it work for you. Just because they did steps A, B, and C doesn't necessarily mean that A, B, and C will work for you. It may just be A and C. It may just be C.
That's right.
Whatever the case may be. So, I don't know, buddy. There you go. I mean, and that's information coming from two aging independent rock stars themselves.
That is true. That is 100% true.
So you take that with a grain of salt, people. You got anything more you'd like to add, sir?
No, man, no. I don't think so. Nope. All good.
All right, so if you like this show, or even if you didn't like it and you want to listen to other shows you may not like, check out our other content at www.thecosmickvoice.com. Music, talk, and nothing but business. Allow yourself to step into the Cosmickverse. Thanks so much for listening. This is the Cosmick Voice. Be sure to check us out at thecosmickvoice.com. Like and follow us on Facebook at The Cosmick Voice. You can find The Cosmick Voice everywhere you listen to online podcasts, like Deezer, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, and so many more.
Okay, folks, that will do it for another episode of The Cosmick Voice. Mick and I would like to say thank you very much for tuning in, and we will see you next week.
You're listening to The Cosmick Voice. Music, talk, and nothing but business.